All right. Hello, everybody. This is a short presentation over personal jurisdiction with Joe Wallace, Jay Fearnley, Thad Barreau, and Omar Rahman. In order for any matter to be heard by any court, the complaint asserted must show that there's personal jurisdiction, venue, and subject matter jurisdiction. There's two types of personal jurisdiction, general and specific. Personal jurisdiction's goal is to ensure that the state has the authority to hear a matter and that their decision is binding on the defendant. General jurisdiction is present where the defendant has continuous and systematic contacts with the state to the extent that he or she is considered to be at home in the state. A case showing this is Pennoyer versus Neff. The conclusion in that case showed that jurisdiction is restricted to the tribunal part of the state. Citizenship is key for this analysis. An individual is a citizen of a state where they are domiciled. You can only be domiciled where you show intent to remain. Courts look at intent to remain using several factors, such as residency, where you own property, where you have business investments, frequency of a person in the location, where this person is going to end up, and any other similar questions that may show where an individual intends to stay. Individuals are only ever a citizen of one state, never multiple, and to be considered at home in the forum state, the courts will look where a person is intending to remain.
Thank you, Joe. This is Jay. I will be getting into the citizenship analysis for corporations, LLCs, and partnerships. And at times we will use part of Joe's analysis to help us. So continuous, in order to have general jurisdiction, this is partially defined as continuous systematic contacts with the forum, showing some kind of purposeful availment. In the case of corporations, LLCs, where the purposeful availment is present. So citizenship is a huge factor in determining where a corporation, an LLC, or partnership is a citizen. Citizenship is a major factor in determining where personal jurisdiction is present. First, we will start with corporations. Corporations have two places of citizenship. One is the place of incorporation, or the place where they were organized, you could say. For example, many will choose Delaware. The second place that they are a citizen of is wherever their principal place of business is, in which we use a nerve center test. The nerve center test is a little more complicated, and we will get into that into next slide. For LLCs and partnerships, the analysis is more simple, but we'll use parts of Joe's analysis, which is wherever the members of the LLC or partnership are citizens, is where the LLC and partnership is a citizen of. For example, if there are three members of an LLC who are all citizens of three different states, the LLC will be a citizen of all three states. However, they will not be a citizen of the state of their organization, and this is different from corporations. Now, to get more specifically in the principal place of business, which is the second place where a corporation is a citizen of, we look at the nerve center test. Once again, we'll skip down to the slide where it says, there can only be one nerve center, just like you can only be domiciled in one place. A corporation can only have one nerve center. In many situations, corporations have a national presence in many offices nationwide. However, when deciding where the nerve center is, we will look at where most of the officers are present and making most of the major decisions affecting the company's policies and practices and conducting their business. So indeed, there is truly only one nerve center.
Thank you, Jay. Now, both Jay and Joe both talked about general personal jurisdiction, but should that fail, there's also the option of specific jurisdiction. So in International Shoe, the court reasoned that when a defendant conducts activity in a state, that gives rise to both certain legal privileges and obligations. And as far as those obligations are concerned, with the activities in the forum state, it would not be unfair or unreasonable to hold a defendant to respond to a suit within that forum state. So there are two components to this international shoe rule. There's minimum contacts and fair play and substantial justice. So minimum contacts just asks what activities or contacts are sufficient to bring a defendant under the jurisdiction of a court that is not of their domicile or of their citizenship. So first we need to ask if the defendant's contacts with the forum state indicate a purposeful availment to the legal privileges and obligations that the forum state provides those who conduct activities within it. And then second, we need to ask, are the defendant's contacts of the forum state related to the claim against them in that state? And then for fair play and substantial justice, a defendant's relationship to the forum must be so that it is reasonable and fair to maintain a suit against the defendant within the forum. So in addition to that international shoe rule, which sets out the constitutional standard for exercising personal jurisdiction over non-residents, a state must also have a long arm statute as well. So does the defendant's contact with the state fall under this long arm statute? Does the state want to exercise jurisdiction over this kind of case? So the state must authorize the courts through the statute to bring these non-residents under the jurisdiction, assuming their jurisdiction, of course, is constitutional under international shoe. So there's two types of long arm statutes. There are non-enumerated statutes, which are these catch-all statutes where regardless of claims, the type of claim, the state can authorizes authority over non-residents who pass international shoe tests. And then there are enumerated statutes, which are much more conditional than the catch-all statutes, which the statutes specify the type of situations in which a state may authorize its courts to exercise jurisdiction over that non-resident defendant.
Thank you, Thad. This is Omar speaking, and I'm going to be going over a few little niches over here. It's going to be first with tag jurisdiction. Tag jurisdiction is a way for a court in one state to constitutionally assert personal jurisdiction over an out-of-state defendant who visits the state where the court presides. The court will have personal jurisdiction if the defendant is properly served while in the state. And a good example is if the defendant gets served traveling through an airport, if he's just traveling through the state. Next is in rem jurisdiction. Jurisdiction in rem assumes the property is the primary object of the action rather than personal liabilities. The action must be brought in the court which has jurisdiction as determined by the location of the property. Any judgment must be enforced upon the property and does not attach to a person. The judgment is binding on all persons who claim title to that property. Next, we go over consent. Express permission from a party gives a court the ability to exercise personal jurisdiction, even if the typical conditions for establishing personal jurisdiction are not satisfied. The forum selection provision is perhaps the most prevalent kind of explicit agreement to personal jurisdiction that can be found in legal documents. A forum selection clause is a contractual provision in which the parties agree to litigate any contractual disputes in a particular court or state. Next, we go over waiver and special appearance. Waiver is appearing before a state court without objecting to personal jurisdiction will lead to waiver of personal jurisdiction unless you're doing it for a special appearance. A special appearance is the act of presenting oneself in a court and thereby submitting to the court's jurisdiction, but only for a specific purpose and not for all the purposes for which a lawsuit is brought. A party makes a special appearance before a state court for the sole purpose of objecting to the court's jurisdiction over that party. So just come into court just to object over personal jurisdiction and arguing your case just for that matter. And thank you guys for listening today.